This is the third speech that I have stood up to give in a series that I intend to continue to give about what the Iraq War is costing us here at home beyond the immeasurable cost of lives, over 839 American lives lost. Those are priceless. And 28,327 Americans who have been seriously injured in the service of their country. Since I started giving these speeches 2 weeks ago, Mr. President, $5 billion more is gone from the Treasury and has been spent in Iraq. It brings the total amount taken from the American people's pockets to $455 billion. Next month, another $10 billion will be sent off to Iraq, and it'll be gone forever. Americans trusted the government with that money. When the numbers are that outrageously high, we all have to constantly be asking ourselves a simple question. What's going to make a bigger difference in our lives? Using the money to fix the major problems we have facing the nation every day, or fighting a war that has achieved nothing for any of us? Could America have achieved more out of that money, spending it on hospitals, life-saving cancer research, schools and universities, food for the needy, roads, train tracks, bridges and airports, or the catastrophe that is the war in Iraq? You know, Mr. President, President Bush likes to parrot the line that we are fighting them over there so that we don't have to fight them here. But I think Americans have figured out what he really means is we are spending all our money over there, and therefore we have none to spend here. Mr. President, I've already spoken out about the massive holes in our homeland security that the war funding in Iraq could have closed being used here at home. I've spoken about the difference that funding could have made for millions of Americans who have to play Russian roulette with their lives because they simply don't have health insurance, including the millions of children who would be covered under the bill that is currently before the Senate, a bill that the President threatens once again to veto while asking for $200 billion more in war funds this year alone. Funds which, by the way, he doesn't even pay for. Wants to make his fiscal bones on the back of children who have no health care coverage, the most important asset we have in our nation, but also the most fragile asset we have in our nation, and says, well, this bill is fiscally not acceptable, yet he can at the same time send us a request for $200 billion, which he doesn't pay for. Not only does he not give children their health insurance, he adds a mountain of debt on their back for the future. Totally irresponsible. So I've talked many times about the children's health insurance. I just want to note, too, that as we move to this vote, I don't know why there are some who still advocate knocking parents off of children's health insurance. Children and parents together successfully brought in more children into the program. And why is it that there are those members of Congress who want to push more Americans into the vast number of the uninsured in this country? Because that's what they're advocating for at the end of the day. But today I'd like to talk about what America would look like if we spent the money George Bush is spending on failing to rebuild Iraq, to repair our own battered infrastructure here at home. And I said, yes, we're spending a lot of money, billions of dollars in Iraq, in which we fail even to rebuild Iraq, but not only are we failing to rebuild in Iraq, we're certainly not having the resources here at home. Since the Iraq War, or better transportation in our country. There's no way to put a price tag on the immense frustration we feel with our systems of transportation. If you've ever slammed your hands on the steering wheel because traffic's unbearable, so you're going to miss your meeting or be late to pick up your child at school. If you ever had your train delayed or been jammed inside a subway car that was not built to carry the number of people who are stuffed in there. If you've ever been stuck waiting in an airport terminal or trapped on a plane sitting on the tarmac waiting to take off hour after hour, then you know our transportation systems are stretched to the limit. And sometimes they just break. 13 people paid the ultimate price and 100 more were injured after the terrible, tragic collapse of a bridge in Minnesota a few months ago. It's scary how easily that could happen again. Here's a truly shocking statistic. The number of bridges that are either structurally deficient or functionally obsolete in this country is enormous. It's about 160,000 bridges, 25% of all the bridges in the country. That means if you've driven over 4 bridges, the odds are that one of them was not in particularly great shape. And that's incredibly scary. So what does it cost to stop another tragedy like the one in Minneapolis from happening? The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that the cost of maintaining and replacing obsolete or deteriorating bridges is about $7.4 billion a year. And that's just the cost of staying even, not allowing the overall quality of our bridges to further deteriorate. If we spent on transportation what we spend on the Iraq War, we could pay off that entire cost, the entire cost of what the Society of Civil Engineers estimates would be the cost of maintaining and replacing all those obsolete or deteriorating bridges in 22 days. Take care of every bridge in America, make everybody safer. In 22 days, the cost of the war in Iraq. 22 days. That's another example of what the war costs. Bridges you can feel confident driving over, confident that you'll get home safe to your family, versus less than a month in Iraq. Today, construction is beginning on the Minneapolis bridge that will replace the one that collapsed. The cost, $234 million. We spend that money in Iraq in less than 1 day. In less than 1 day. Americans are also feeling the hassle of commuting by car or plane, especially for long distances. Oil prices are hitting record highs. Many feel that petroleum production is reaching a peak. Burning oil thickens our air with smog and stokes the fires of the global climate crisis, threatening to drown buildings on our coastlines underwater and create massive droughts inland. If we don't create viable transportation options that will end our dependence on oil, America is going to be in big, big trouble. With all this in mind, yesterday the Senate passed a bill to boost funding to Amtrak. We passed that bill so that the great American relationship with the railroad could be restored and brought to new peaks of excellence. Funding for the Amtrak bill would be $19.2 billion over 6 years. That money would make passenger transportation easier. It would improve rail security. It would make our air cleaner. And it would be a boost to the economy. But just like every appropriations bill that has come or is on its way to the President's desk under the Democratic Congress, the administration has argued that we just don't have money for good public transportation systems. Well, while President Bush's mouth is moving, his hand is signing checks for other things. What the Amtrak bill would spend in 6 years, the President spends in Iraq in 2 months. But we are trying to have a national rail transportation system that gets people, sales forces from small and mid-sized companies to work, to intercity travel, to sell their products or services, to get people to great institutions of research and also great institutions of healing and hospitals, to get people maybe to the nation's capital or to other major cities along the Northeast Corridor, to have the opportunity after a post-September 11th world to understand that multiple modes of transportation are critical in order for that if we have an incident, a terrorist incident in one part of the country, we can move people along, as on that fateful day, what was open for intercity travel when every airplane was grounded? It was Amtrak. Yet, President